Welcome back to EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and today we're diving into something that's reshaping how European enterprises operate: Agentic AI for Enterprise Autonomy. Sam, we're in 2026 territory here. This isn't sci-fi anymore, is it?
Not even close, Alex. What's fascinating is the timing. We're looking at this convergence where the EU AI Act enforcement deadline, competitive pressure, and mature open-source models are all hitting at the same moment. It's creating this perfect storm of adoption pressure and compliance urgency.
Perfect storm. I like that framing. So let's ground this. When we talk about Agentic AI, what are we actually talking about? Because I think a lot of people hear agent and picture a chatbot or maybe a simple automation tool.
That's the misconception we need to clear up immediately. A true agentic system is fundamentally different. It's goal-directed, autonomous, and capable of reasoning across multiple steps with minimal human oversight. Think vendor negotiations, supply chain logistics adjustments, or employee onboarding, tasks that require decision-making, adaptation, and cross-system coordination. That's agentic. A chatbot answering FAQs? That's not agentic.
So, the agent actually understands context and can adjust its approach based on what it encounters. That's a significant leap from traditional RPA or rule-based automation. The data backs this up too. Gartner found that 62% of enterprise leaders now distinguish agentic AI from conversational AI. They see it as strategic infrastructure, not just a customer-facing tool.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. 54% of European enterprises are planning to invest in agentic AI within the next 18 months, and 73% cite autonomous operations as their primary business driver. The appetite is there, but here's the problem. 76% of these organizations lack the mature governance frameworks they'll need to comply with the EU AI Act by 2026.
So we have this massive investment rush, but governance is the bottleneck. That's the tension of the moment. Sam, why is governance so critical when we're talking about autonomous agents specifically?
Because autonomous decision-making at scale introduces new kinds of risk. The EU AI Act classifies agentic systems as high risk by default, and for good reason. When an agent is making decisions independently across vendor negotiations or supply chain adjustments, the potential impact compounds. That agent needs documented risk assessments, human-in-the-loop mechanisms for critical decisions, continuous monitoring for drift, transparent decision trails, and regular impact assessments. You can't retrofit compliance. It has to be architected in from day one.
So we're talking about governance-first architecture, not governance as an afterthought. What does that actually look like in practice? How do you build an agent that's autonomous but also compliant?
You establish what we call decision boundaries and transparency requirements up front. You embed monitoring systems directly into the agent's architecture. You create escalation protocols so that when the agent encounters uncertainty or a decision that exceeds its authority threshold, it escalates to a human. And critically, you build audit trails from day one. Every decision the agent makes gets logged and traceable for regulatory inspection. It's not about limiting the agent, it's about intelligent guardrails.
And the human-in-the-loop piece, that's not just a compliance checkbox. That's actually where the intelligence amplification happens. The agent handles the routine decisions, but humans stay in the loop for the nuanced or high-stakes ones.
Precisely. And this is where an AI lead architecture role becomes essential, someone responsible for defining those decision boundaries, oversight requirements, and escalation thresholds. Without clarity on where the agent's autonomy ends and human judgment begins, you're flying blind from a governance perspective.
Let's talk about the competitive angle. You mentioned earlier that SMEs see agentic AI as essential to staying competitive by 2026. Why is the timeline so tight? What changes in 2026 that makes this a deadline?
Multiple things. The EU AI Act enforcement ramifies fully in 2026. Organizations that haven't built compliant governance frameworks by then face penalties and operational friction. Meanwhile, US and Asian enterprises are already deploying agentic systems at scale. The competitive gap widens if European enterprises delay. And we're seeing cost-effective sovereign deployment options emerge with open-source models like Mistral AI and Llama 3.1, so the cost-benefit calculus favors moving now.
So it's not just regulation driving adoption. It's regulation plus competitive pressure plus enabling technology all converging. That's a genuine inflection point. For organizations listening right now, what's the playbook? Where do they start?
First, honestly assess your governance maturity. Most organizations that report lacking governance frameworks do have some policies. They're just not integrated or comprehensive enough for agentic systems. Second, identify your highest impact use cases, where autonomous agents deliver the greatest operational improvement. Don't boil the ocean. Start with a bounded, well-governed pilot. Third, establish your governance infrastructure in parallel. You're not waiting for the agent to be built, then bolting on governance. That doesn't work.
So you're essentially building three things in parallel: the agent, the governance framework, and the organizational muscle to operate both together.
Exactly. And you need someone in charge of that architecture. You're AI-led. That person owns the decision about which tasks the agent handles autonomously versus which require human judgment. They design the escalation protocols. They ensure the audit trail captures what the organization needs for compliance. Without that clarity, you end up with agents that operate in a governance vacuum.
I'm hearing a lot of organizational discipline here, which is interesting because Agentic AI sounds like it's about letting systems loose. But actually, it's the opposite. More autonomy requires more sophisticated governance.
That's the paradox, and it's critical to understand. Yes, the agent operates with high autonomy within defined boundaries, but those boundaries themselves demand rigorous design, monitoring, and adjustment. You're not creating a system that runs unsupervised. You're creating a system that's intelligently supervised. Humans stay informed and engaged, but at a higher level than manually executing every task.
So the real competitive advantage isn't speed or cost savings alone. It's operational resilience and the ability to scale decision-making across the organization while staying compliant and maintaining control.
Spot on. The enterprises that win with Agentic AI in 2026 and beyond won't be the ones that deployed agents fastest. They'll be the ones that built governance frameworks so good that they can safely delegate complex decisions to autonomous systems, adapt those systems as markets shift, and confidently explain every decision to regulators. That's competitive advantage.
Sam, final question. What's the one thing you'd tell an organization that's on the fence right now? They see the opportunity, but they're worried about governance complexity.
Start now. Waiting until 2026 or later doesn't reduce governance complexity. It compresses your timeline and forces you into reactive implementation. The organizations investing now are learning what works. They're iterating on governance frameworks while competitive pressure is still manageable. By the time enforcement comes, they've had months or years to refine their approach. That's the difference between leading and scrambling.
That's a really important insight. Governance complexity exists whether you start now or later, but proactive adoption gives you time to learn and adapt. Sam, thanks for breaking this down. For our listeners who want to dive deeper into the specifics of EU AI Act compliance, agentic architecture patterns, and implementation strategies, the full article is on etherlink.ai. You'll find detailed frameworks, use cases, and compliance checklists there. Thanks for listening to EtherLink AI Insights, and we'll see you next time.